Hi everybody, we're going to talk about notes from the 7th grade Common Core 2.2 and 2.3. We're going to be adding and subtracting rational numbers. So we're going to be focusing today on adding and subtracting positive and negative fractions and decimals. In order to do this, we're going to use the same rules that we already know from adding and subtracting integers. We're also going to go ahead and change every single time we have a subtraction problem. We're going to create an equivalent addition expression. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the first problem. The first problem is asking us to subtract negative 8 2/3 minus 6 1/6. First thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create an equivalent addition expression by subtracting 6 is the same thing as adding negative 6 1/6. So subtracting 6 1/6 is the same as adding negative 6 1/6. I'm going to then go ahead and say, all right, I have a negative plus a negative. I'm going to add those, and it's going to be more negatives. So I know the operation that I have to go ahead and do is adding these two fractions. So I'm really going to have to add 8 2/3 plus 6 1/6. I know my answer is going to be negative, but I need to go ahead and then follow the rules that I know for adding fractions. I'm going to go ahead and change it into an improper fraction. 24 plus 2, 26 thirds. 37 6. I know when I add or subtract fractions, I need a common denominator. And my denominator I'm going to use is 6. 37 over 6 is already with the 6 denominator, so I don't have to do anything for that. But 26 thirds, I have to create an equivalent fraction. This is times 2, so this is times 2. 26 times 2 is 52. I'm going to add now the numerators. 52 and 37, that's 89 sixths. I'm going to go ahead and change that to an improper fraction. 6 goes into 89. If I don't know that, I'm going to doodle it over here. That goes in there 1 time, 29. That goes in there 4 times, 24. And I have a remainder of 5. So my answer is 14 and 5 6. And then I go ahead and I write that as a negative. So let me recap. I've changed it to an equivalent addition expression. I have then followed the rules with adding fractions because I'm adding a negative plus a negative. I know my answer is negative, and then I need common denominators, and I use improper fractions to get negative 14 and 5 6. In example 2, it's another subtraction problem. I'm going to create an equivalent addition expression, 12.8 plus negative 21.6. I'm going to remind myself of the integer rules. I'm adding a positive and negative, therefore I have 0 pairs. When I have 0 pairs, I end up subtracting. I'm going to subtract the largest, the negative from the negative minus the positive because I have more negatives. So I'm going to do 21.6. And when I do that, I'm going to line up decimals. Because when I subtract and add decimals, I have to make sure the decimal points added up. 14, 4, carry my 1. 4, oh, I'm subtracting. 6 minus 8 I can't do. So I'm going to take 1 away from the 1 and make it a 0. 16 minus 8 is 8. Can't do the 0, but I know that 20 minus 12 is 8. And then I have to look back. Is my answer going to be positive or negative? It's going to be negative because I have more negatives. So my answer is negative 8.8. I've changed it to an equivalent addition expression. I've then determined, do I add or subtract based on are there 0 pairs or are there not? I've lined up my decimal points to create a subtraction problem, and I've made sure my answer is negative because I have more negatives. I'm going to use the same process when I'm finding a distance between 2 rational numbers on a number line. I need to find how far is negative 2 2/3 from 2 1/2. When I'm finding distances can never be negative. So I need to make sure that when I'm going ahead and looking at it, my final answer is positive. So I am going to add these 2 numbers up, and in order to do that, I am going to take 2 1/2, and I'm going to subtract negative 2 2/3. I want to know how far it is between, and distances mean I'm subtracting. I then go ahead and set up an equivalent addition expression, which is 2.5 plus 2 2/3. They're both positive, so I know I have no zero pairs, so I add them. When I add fractions, I need a common denominator and improper fractions. 4 plus 1 is 5, 6, 7, 8. I now need common denominators. I'm going to pick 6. 2 times 3 is 6, so 5 times 3 is 15. 3 times 2 is 6, so 8 times 2 is 16. I then go ahead and add my numerators only for an answer of 31/6, which is equivalent to 5 1/6. Now in this case, when I went ahead and subtracted, I need to make sure that that answer is positive, and it is. So that distance is 5 1/6. I can also go ahead and look. The distance here is 2.5. The distance here is 2 2/3. I add them up for a total of 5 1/6. On my last one, I'm evaluating using positive and negative fractions and decimals. If I go ahead and I take 2 times 1/4 plus negative 3.5. I've gone ahead and I've changed out the value. I've changed out the variables for the value of x and y. When a number and a letter are next to each other, I know I need to multiply. So I have 2 times 1/4. And then I'm going to go ahead and add negative 3/2 to that. So 2 times 1/4 ends up equaling 2/4 or 1/2. So now the next part of my problem is 1/2 plus negative 3/2. Because they're in improper fractions, I need to use my integer rules. I have a positive and negative. I have 0 pairs. That means I'm going to subtract. I'm going to subtract 3 minus 1 for an answer of 2. And my answer is negative 2 because I have more negatives. Negative 2 divided by 2 is an answer of negative 1. In finding distance, I subtract the two values and make sure my answer is going to be a positive because distances can't be negative. When I'm evaluating, I'm replacing the value that they gave me for the variables into the expression. When a number and a letter are next to each other, that means I'm multiplying. This is a lot of content. You're going to need to stop and start many times. You're going to need to go back and copy down everything I wrote down. If there's a part where you don't understand where it came from, I want you to write notes or send an email. This is a video that you're going to have to watch more than once. The goal of taking notes is for you to understand the content and be able to understand the steps that I went through. So, have a good one, guys.